Hi, well, my name is Marleen Julien. I am from Haiti. I was born in Haiti and I grew up in the US, and I am the owner of Creole Solutions.
Hello and welcome to Obehi Podcast. I'm your host, Obehi A14, and I strongly believe that everyone has a story to share. Now let's get started into this episode.
A translation company that specializes in Haitian Creole. And what we do is we provide solutions for companies and government agencies that want to communicate with the Haitian population. And Creole Solutions is also a social enterprise because we work to provide training and job placement for people in Haiti, the Dominican Republic. We have people in Europe. We have Haitians all over the world, and we are creating opportunities for them with our language and culture.
That's really very interesting. Language is a connective factor. Anyway, let's take some time to know you better now. And so you were born in Haiti, right?
Yes.
Okay, tell me a little background of Haiti. There are some people who do not know Haiti. So what do you want us to remember of your childhood growing up there?
Oh, wow. I had a beautiful childhood in Haiti. I grew up in the countryside with my grandmother in Cap Haitian. And it was one thing I always tell people is that it's only when I came to the United States that I realized that I was poor. I never felt poor when I was in Haiti because I was loved. My community was like my village. My community was always there supporting me, my friends. I was running around and I felt protected. We always had the basics. We never starved because Haiti back then we had plants and trees and mango trees and everything. So I had a beautiful childhood in Haiti. And I remember my grandmother, being under the tree, telling me stories and just having a wonderful childhood.
Well, what do you want people to know about the culture of Haiti? This is people of African descent. Africa is not only in Africa now because people moving from Africa to other part of the world, both voluntarily and involuntarily. So we begin to settle in some places and begin to create our culture. Sometimes the life that we live have not been free. Sometimes we have to fight for it to be who we are today. So for some people who do not have a good grasp of the Haitian history, is there anything you want to share with us there?
Oh, absolutely. Well, first of all, Haiti is a little Africa. We are descendants of Africa, and Africa is huge. The enslaved Africans who were transplanted into Haiti came from different tribes, from the Yoruba tribe, Fongbe, Bantu, Congo. Like we had people that came from all over Africa. So Haiti is a little Africa. We have managed to preserve Haitian culture, African culture and traditions. And I think if anyone of who lived in Africa goes to Haiti, they would feel right at home because you'll see our demeanor, our language, our just everything about Haiti is like Africa. So I always say that we are Haitians, we are Africans living in the Caribbean.
That's lovely. That's lovely. It's good to remember that apart from the 54 countries in Africa, we also have
Before.
in the diaspora some people we can count. In fact, the people in the diaspora actually they are described by the African Union as the sixth region of Africa, which means that they are not actually considered as a part. They are considered as part of the African people, and it really should be so. We really should be working together as a common people. All right. Now, tell me about your project, the Creole project. How did you start with it, and what are you targeting?
Well, I started as a freelancer. I worked for the Haitian consulate in Chicago for many years, and that's when I was introduced to translation and interpretation. I used to interpret for the officials that were coming to Haiti and officials that wanted to do business with the Haitian government. And back then there weren't many Haitian translators, and people were always calling the consulate looking for translators. And I was like, well, I don't know any translators. I don't know anyone, especially in Chicago. We didn't have such a large population of Haitians in Chicago. And then someone said, do you speak Creole and English? I said, yes. And then she invited me to do an interpretation session. Before that, I was always interpreting in a diplomatic setting. So it was my first time working. I was at a courthouse, and I felt like I really helped the person to get what he needed to get across. I really helped him to express himself with the judge and the lawyer because he did not speak any English. And that's when I started doing translation and interpretation, and I really liked it until I started working for a major translation agency as an over-the-phone interpreter. I worked with them for 5 years, and I really became an expert in Haitian Creole interpretation when working for that company. And in 2014, I went back to grad school because I had moved to Haiti after the earthquake, because I wanted to do something. I felt like I needed to be in Haiti to contribute to Haiti's development after the devastating earthquake. But that didn't work out. I felt like I wasn't ready to do the type of change that I wanted to do in Haiti. So I went back to grad school in France, and I had quit my job at the consulate. So that was the only way of survival, by doing translation. And I was going to school during the day and translating at night. And there were clients that were coming and coming and coming. And while I was studying development, I was studying international development, I was also trying to figure out an economic model to contribute to Haiti's development. And I know that I didn't want to go back to the government or NGO world anymore because I felt like they were not effective in terms of development. So then I decided, well, I'm getting all these clients and I can't handle all of the work. Then I should try to create opportunities for other translators. So then I started working with one translator, working with him. We were translating together. The company kept growing and growing and growing. I started investing in the translation. And I noticed that a lot of the translators, although they had a certificate in the translation, but they were not really qualified. They didn't know about translation technology. They didn't know about different techniques. And Haitian Creole is a fairly new language compared to other languages. They didn't really have the skills. They were more skilled in French than Haitian Creole. So I started training them. And then we just kept growing and growing and growing. And today we're creating jobs for over 20 translators in Haiti, Turkey, Dominican Republic, France, and the United States. And we hope to keep growing. We are getting some very important contracts right now. People are noticing Creole Solutions. They're noticing our work. And as Haitian Creole is growing, especially in the United States, our company continues to grow.
That's very, very important now. Okay, we are going to talk about the business side of your translation. That is very important for us because here we talk a lot about our, apart from the fact that we want to understand also our history, where we are coming from. It's also important that we talk about our business. What are we doing that put money on our pocket at the end of the day? Because we need to grow as a people. We also need to network and things like that. All right, now let's talk a little bit about the Creole language in Haiti. There are some people who do not understand what it means. Can you talk more about it?
Well, sure. Well, first of all, the language is Haitian Creole because there are different types of Creole languages. There's Portuguese Creole, and even the Haitian Creole is a French-based Creole language. There are different French-based Creole language spoken in Martinique, Guadeloupe, basically countries that were colonized by the French. So Haitian Creole was born out of contact between the enslaved Africans, the European colonizers, and the indigenous people and Haiti. So Haitian Creole is a blend of different languages: French, English, Taino. That's the language of the Arawaks, the indigenous people who live there, and of course many African languages such as Fon, Yoruba. So Haitian Creole is a language that was created by our African ancestors so that they could communicate, because there were different, like I said earlier, there were people from different tribes who were forced to coexist, and we had to find a way to communicate. So we just mixed all the languages, and then eventually it became a Creole language where the children who were born in Haiti spoke that language and they were able to communicate. And I said that we have English influence because we're also occupied by the Americans in the early 1900s. So there's a lot of English words in Haitian Creole, and especially now with the hip hop and just pop culture and technology. A lot of our words, terminology for technology, come from the English language. So Haitian Creole is a blend of languages spoken by the people of Haiti.
You did also make mention of the father of French. No, I will ask you something about that later on. But now, because you made mention of Yoruba, and also, of course, we understand that Haiti are people coming from Africa who were enslaved and taken to that part of the world. Of course, Haiti have a very robust and interesting history in that they actually become the first independent people of Africa after they have been colonized. No, so it is very, very important, the history of Haiti, for people to understand. But
Yes.
talking of the language, the Creole, I'm trying to understand the connection and how that connection has been reinforced. Talking of course, African and African languages, like I was saying before, you did make mention of the Yoruba language. Have got it to Haiti, and people begin to form or modify some of these languages. So I want you to spend some time explaining some of this connection.
One thing that really helped me understand my language was when in college I decided I wanted to learn Yoruba. And because for a long time we believed that Haitian Creole is a corrupt French language, like it's broken French. But the truth is, it's an African language. The grammatical structure. When I started learning Yoruba, I started learning the grammatical structure. It's the same way we speak. So Haitian Creole is basically mostly French words, but the syntax is African. And we also have a lot of connections with Yoruba, also a lot of connection with the Fongbe language, because Benin they speak Yoruba and they speak Fong, they speak all of these languages. So the connection that we have is in our minds. We still think like Africans when it comes to language, or even Haitian Creole is a phonemic language. We use a lot of sounds. We use a lot of, like, the Haitian. I know that my Yoruba friends, they always say, "Oh, they put "o" after everything." We also do that when we speak Haitian Creole. So the patterns are very similar. If you study both languages, you'll see that Haitian Creole is more of an African language than it is a French language.
You did say something like some people look at or thought of Haitian Creole as if we were broken French. So I don't know if you want to say something more about that. But it's actually broken.
Not broken anything. It's not broken. It's a language that is just. I always make the comparison with the French language. There was a time we were saying people wanted to speak Latin. They refused. Like French was not a popular language. Latin was the official language, and people did not want to speak Latin. I think Haitian Creole went through the same thing. But Haitian Creole is not a broken language. It has its own grammar. We have a Haitian Creole Academy that regulates the language. We have our own, like I said, we have our own structure. We have our own rules. So it's a language on its own right.
All right. Do we know anything about the formation of these languages? how actually it was formed. Okay, I'm looking at a bit of the history of the language now, how it developed, because language actually evolves.
Well, I can tell you, first of all, it evolved in two ways. The language evolved, and also our writing system has evolved over the years. When we first started speaking French during the colonial period, I would say it was mainly French words. It was mainly French words because the the colonizers spoke a French language called oil. And we still have some of these words in the Haitian Creole language, although they've become extinct in the French standard French language. So we started first, it was, we needed to find a way to communicate with the colonizers, and we needed to find a way to communicate with the other enslaved people. So this is how the language was formed. Like, like in borders, people, there are like languages are created when there are merchants working with each other in a border and they need to find a way to communicate. So it was the same way. So the Haitian, the enslaved people and the colonizers needed to find a way to communicate, and the people in the plantation needed to find a way to communicate. So that's how the language evolved. So in the beginning, of course, we didn't understand each other because we're from different tribes, we spoke different languages, and then and some words are deformed because we may think we hear something and then we don't hear it. For instance, in French, tien means here. And we have a word in Haitian Creole called chinchin, which is a cornmeal. So it was when the colonizer, according to legend, when the colonizer was giving us the cornmeal, they were saying tien tien. And we thought that was the name of the food. So we call it chinchin. That's the name that we give to the food. So in the beginning, that's how it evolved. And then, but again, when there was a new generation of Haitians who did not speak the African language, and then they spoke the Creole language. So that's how that's how this language started to evolve. The Haitian Creole writing system, we have a writing system. The Haitian Creole writing system has also evolved over the years. Before, it was just like as if you were spelling a French word. We use the French standard for writing. And in 2011, they became with a new resolution on the writing system. So, but even in 1980, there was a reform made on the language where we have our own writing system, we have our own alphabet, and that was also a way to take us out of the system, as you know, to disassociate with the French language.
I understand our thinking. That there is a kind of French interest in Haitian language, the financing of Haitian language by the French and maybe the America here. Is there anything you want to say in line to that?
I know that the US has invested a lot in the development of the Haitian language. There are programs at MIT, there's a Creole Institute at the University of Indiana. They have worked with a renowned linguist called Yves Desjean, who is one of the people who really worked on the Haitian writing system. And today, many people believe that the new writing system is closer to the English language than to the French language. I don't know why they would be interested in our language. Maybe they want to continue to have influence in our language and politics. But I know that there is a lot of investments on the development of the Haitian language. But I almost also note that the US has more Haitian Creole translated materials just more Haitian Creole materials than Haiti, because they translate a lot of their materials in Haitian Creole. A lot of government documents for the Haitian population have been translated into Haitian Creole.
In terms of the documentation of this writing, there is a lot also happening that are done by the Haitian people. So that I've tried so that we can see that it's a comparison between that and what maybe the US and maybe other national like French, for example, might be doing about the Haitian Creole.
Well, we have materials in Haiti. We have a lot of poets that publish in Haitian Creole, a lot of books published in Haitian Creole. Not enough. We don't have enough content in Haitian Creole. The Haitian Creole Academy is working on getting more materials. They're working on a dictionary. They're working on a lot of materials. But you have to understand that because of our economic situation, we don't have enough resources to support the language as we should. And that may be why a lot of our support is coming from other countries. And then they get a saying in how we manage our projects.
Now, if other countries are the one financing the project of language in Haiti, do they have the possibility of influencing how that language can be, the evolution of the language, and the significance, most importantly?
Of course, if they're financing the language, of course they're going to have an influence. They're going to decide what words, because Haitian Creole is still a new language. Our vocabulary is missing. We don't have standard. Many terms have not been standardized by the Haitian Creole Academy. So you could say the French may have a term, like a new invention may come out, and we want to know what word to use, or a new technological term. You could be using social media, and there are new terms that the French want to be pure. They want to have a French version, and the English will want to have an English version. So usually in Haitian Creole, we have to choose between the two. You have to either choose the French language or the English language and use the writing system, the Haitian Creole writing system. Usually when I'm translating, I have to choose either the English or the French term. So if the English is, well, the Americans are investing in the language, of course, when they're deciding on what language they're going to speak, they're going to choose the English term to become a part of our vocabulary.
All right. So here now we have a Haitian person, an academic or a writer who is writing a document for the Haitian people. So this person is now being made to choose between French and the American
English.
structure of the Haitian language, correct? Is that
Yeah, and
correct?
that's yes, because we don't have the terms, and we want to use a term, because also professionals in Haiti are educated either in English or in French, so they are familiar with one or the other. So even when they're communicating, that word becomes more popular depending on where they were educated. So we usually have to choose between the English and the French. Before, it used to be the French. Whenever there was a scientific term, we would use the French. But the English is becoming more and more and more influential in the terminology, the Haitian Creole terminology.
Well, I think that is something that actually might need to be understood in that I still do know. I don't want to say it's not a good gesture on their part, try to invest in the language of Haiti people. But it's like you are building a house on the benevolence of another person who is just doing this help for you. Okay, let me put it in a very clear sense. In the relationship between Africa and Europe, is based on a simple logic that Europe is helping Africa. A very simple one. This is how it is. If that is how it is understood, it is very trickish actually as a logic, no? That
Right,
for
because
500 years, Europe have been helping Africa, and this help will continue even another 500 years. Whereas it's supposed to be a relationship where you are helping me, I am helping you. Where you are doing something for me, you need to tell me what I'm going to give you in return. I think when we build ourselves on the basis of the benevolence of the other people who choose to help us on their terms, who choose to do something for us on their term, without asking us what they are going to get back in return, they are basically going to get everything, including us, in return. I don't know if it make any sense.
Absolutely. I understand what you're saying. And there is a group of people who are completely against the promotion of Haitian Creole. They feel that it's a way to keep the Haitian people illiterate. It's a way to keep us in poverty. And that's why I don't necessarily agree with it, but there is a lot of people saying that the US is financing the so-called development of the Haitian Creole language, and and the language is still there still needs a lot. There hasn't been really significant improvement in the development of the language, and now they want to educate people only in Haitian Creole because some scholars believe that the Haitian people do not speak English. I mean, do not speak French. They speak Haitian Creole, so they want the education to be mainly in Haitian Creole. And this is being pushed by people who are supported by the US. And some people believe that it's a way to keep us impoverished so that we never, so that the young, the poor, the children of the poor who will be educated in English will never get ahead, because no people from the higher class would never allow their children to be educated only in Haitian Creole. They want their children to be educated in French and in English. So maybe this has to do with what you're insinuating, but I don't know. I can't really give my opinion on that, whether the US government is supposedly is investing in the language just to keep us down so that we never get ahead, so that we don't know about science, so that we don't know about technology. Some people believe that you cannot study science and technology in Haitian Creole, but I can tell you that you can study science and technology in Haitian Creole because I've worked on these materials and I teach it on social media. So it's just a matter of coming up with the terminology and then agreeing on it and then using it. There's a methodology to introduce new terms in a language. So this sounds more political, and I don't want to be too political, but I do understand what you're saying.
All right. It's important that you understand that. Um, I was having a thought, no? I don't know whether it is true or false, but here we're thinking aloud, no?
Right.
Is it possible that certain terminology, looking at the Haitian Creole, for example, no, because of course it happened all across, no, whether you are looking at the Ivorian Creole of French, or maybe the way that the Nigerians speak their English, which is supposed to be, in my opinion, should have been regarded as the official language of Nigeria.
Oh,
Instead, what
you
we
mean
speak in
Yoruba?
Nigeria, no, not Yoruba, the Nigeria have a Creole of English. It is called Pidgin English. It is not the official British English. It is not the official of American English. It's the way Nigerians decide to speak English based on their understanding, based on their tonality, based on the significance, based on, because language is not an academic thing. Language is a natural thing in that
Yes.
it evolves itself. Okay, at a certain point, we need to write and explain what it is. But we don't write in a classroom and then bring it to the people to practice. It's on the other way around. So, in that sense, Nigeria, for example, having a pidgin English, maybe we could get a better term for it and make it an official language of Nigeria, because every Nigerian understands this.
And I
Instead,
believe even people from like Jamaica, the pidgin language is similar to the patois spoken in Jamaica because they have English roots.
actually, yeah, that's true. I'm actually looking at both the evolution of the language now and the officialization of the language itself, because every language itself is a moving thing, it's an evolving thing. It is not just fixed and it remains that. It becomes also very delicate now, no? In that what is even right and what is wrong in terms of these terms and terminology that we use every day. But on the other hand, certain terminology and language can also become a tool of liberating or imprisoning people.
Of course.
Just a thought, no?
Well,
Is it
and
possible? Yeah, yeah, please go.
no, go ahead, go ahead.
No, I wanted to say, is it possible that certain term, because if we are using maybe Yoruba as a reference point now, maybe for most of, because not only the people from Yoruba ethnic group were taken into slavery, but let's say a large proportion of people came from there, and it's one of the languages that actually survived more among the African descent. No, for this reason, you see a lot of people referencing the Yoruba in as the language that their ancestors speak in the diaspora. No,
Okay.
say we use that one as a reference point. Then it will be easy for us to construct sentences and senses and our sensibility also, the significance of terms and terminology, what they represent for us. Now, if we expect academians, people who are maybe in the United States, to come out and define for us how we are going to speak this language, I think that is very trickish because they don't speak this language themselves, those in the academians.
Yes, it's
People who
true.
speak this language are the ordinary people. In this case, people in the Haiti, the ordinary people. Because if we allow only the expert to construct this language and give it to the people to speak, they have, because since they have the possibility of able to encode or encode some significance of certain terminology there, they're able to condition the people in a way that they want instead of the way that it should naturally evolve. That is some of my feeling there.
Yes, that's very interesting. And I have to say, the people who really speak Creole, the people who speak advanced Creole, are people from the countryside who haven't had contact with other languages like French or English. If you want to hear an authentic Creole, it's from the people. And people are saying that the academy needs to standardize the language, and other groups are saying, we already speak the language, we already have our words for everything. We are the people decide what words we should use. And so I understand what you're saying. So to bring a foreigner and to decide how you should use the language, it doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't make any sense. It's for the same reason that maybe they want to condition people in some ways, no? You know,
Well,
even at,
we have been conditioned to with language. For instance, it was done before, and I can see there's a lot of terms that are considered derogatory in Haitian Creole. They're not derogatory. I remember I was having a conversation with you about how the word Ausa in Haitian Creole, Ausa means thief, and Ausa is a tribe. And then Baka is someone who's ugly or evil. So they use people's tribes to make them, to turn them into derogatory terms in the Haitian Creole language. So when you're saying, so that did condition us to hate ourselves because we are from these tribes, we are from Africa. So Congo, for instance, is someone who's a peasant, someone who's submissive. So we did use those terms to condition people and to use them in a negative way. So I understand exactly what you're saying. So I just don't know if that is what is being done with the U.S. Financing the evolution of our language. So it is an important point. It is something to look into. And the only way to solve the problem is for us to be self-sufficient, for us to decide on which way to move forward with our language. And people are complaining because, for instance, if someone wants to do an academic, to publish something academic in Haitian Creole, we're guessing these terms. We're guessing the scientific terms because in the U.S., in France, there is an academy that every year they publish new terms so that people know how to use those terms. But in Haiti, we don't have that. So I think it's the Haitian government or the Haitian authorities that need to decide for scientific terms. But in terms of the language, for the common, everyday language, we already speak the language. We don't need an academy to decide how to speak. We already speak the language. The grammar, we don't, to be honest, I don't even think about grammar rules, Haitian grammar rules, because I already speak the language. The only people who learn grammar are people who are learning the language. And it's not even an effective way to learn a language. My 90-year-old grandmother, who probably never went to school, she knows the grammar because, like you said, it's natural. She speaks the language. She doesn't need to know verb, subject, and all of that because it's natural to her.
It's a very interesting thing. You see, those who really need to go and study the language, understand the grammar, and the rest of it, are those who do not know the language.
Right.
In this case, let's look at it. You know, it's something that is play in the eyes. No, I'm just trying to make sense out of it. No, in that if you were born in Haiti and you are a Haitian person, you live there, you already know the language. No,
Correct.
you already know the language. It's just like, for example, I was saying before, if you are a Nigerian, you grew up in Nigeria, you don't need to be told what is called the pidgin English because you already know about the pidgin English.
Right.
But if you are the same person in Nigeria, you want to speak the Queen's English or the American English, you need to go to school to learn that.
Just like
And
French.
now let's look at it from a strategic point of view. That is a deficit to the Nigerian people because you are teaching people in a language that they do not understand, they do not have 100% control over. That is what you are going to use to reason, to write books, to communicate, to go outside of the country and speak. Whereas there is a language that you can speak even yourself. Because now, if the Nigerian government have made Pidgin English the official language of Nigeria, if you are a British person coming to Nigeria, you will need to learn that language before you can communicate to the Nigerian people. But if the Nigerians are speaking Queen's English, you already know everything about Nigeria. If you get to any part of Nigeria, you don't need to learn anything. You just come in and open door for you. Whereas to the Nigerian people, you are coming to British or to America, you have the door, it's closed.
Yes.
You
Yes.
want to learn about the American people, they learn the American English. It's even a very simple thing. Why can't we understand this?
I mean, we understand it. I think it's a matter of power. Um, since we are like the English, the British, they have more political power than the Nigerians. So they get to establish these rules, they get to decide. And I think what you just mentioned is exactly what is happening in Haiti. All Haitians speak Haitian Creole, but we have to go to school, except for the very rich who speak English, who speak French with their children. Most people, they speak Haitian Creole at home. They speak Haitian Creole in the schoolyard. They try to speak French in school. Sometimes, like you said, the teacher doesn't even speak the French correctly. They just know a few words. And then they're learning these concepts in French. So it's kind of like taking my kid, my 7-year-old, to China and wanting him to learn and wanting him to excel. And this is the other group of people that I was saying that believe education should be done in Haitian Creole, at least in the early years, so that the people could learn in the language, so they could understand what they are studying instead of memorizing them. Up until today, our education system is based on memorizing things that we don't even understand. There was a joke about someone who memorized something from 30, 40 years ago. He still remembers it, but he still doesn't understand it. It's only 40 years later that he understands what he has been memorizing. So our education system is very archaic. And one of the ways for it to work is not only to change the language, but to change the way we learn, because the way people learn has evolved. Education instruction has evolved over the years. But like the other group of people who are working on promoting the Haitian Creole language, they believe that children should be learning in a language they understand, not in a language that is foreign to them. And especially when some words in French may be completely different from the Creole word. And the good news is the Haitian Ministry of Education is working to change that. I believe that next year, all of the books, the books, the educational books, will be in Haitian Creole from the early years of education. So there is a lot of changes coming up for in the education system, and they recently passed a law where they would stop financing French books. The Ministry of Education will stop financing French books. So that is a way to introduce the Haitian Creole language into the schools. But at the same time, if we stop financing French books, we have to create more Creole books. So I think that's where the challenge is going to be. If you're getting rid of something, you need to have something in place so that the children can actually learn. So it's not just about getting rid of it or destroying, but we need to build something and to put structure in place so that the children could learn.
But in fact, it can actually be all of it together, no? In that, instead of maybe replacing the original, because as far as I'm concerned, the original Creole language of Haiti is a Haitian Creole language, no? This version of the American, the English or the British or the Portuguese or the Italian, Haitian Creole, if they want, let them finance it, let them study it on their own. But they have to be the official Creole language in Haiti, which is the Haitian one. This one should be the one that is going to be the reference for everyone. If this is the case, that is no problem. It's like me saying, okay, this is how I want to speak Italian. Okay, it's on me. I need to study it. I want people to speak like, I need to create books on that. But this should not be made the official Italian language. The official Italian language has to be the one that is produced by the Italian government. These are the people that are called Italian. They decide how they want to speak the language. That is the official Italian language. I believe it should be happening like this because it's like you going to the United States, maybe like Nigeria going to the United States and say, we are studying the American English. This is your English. Are you stupid? The American decide what is American English.
Of course. Yeah. Actually, it seems absurd, but that's how things are done in countries in the Caribbean and Africa. The Europeans decide for us because they finance those projects. So they decide for us. It sounds absurd. And it's just the same thing with development. When they come, they give you funding for a project. They decide how to run the project. They bring their employees, the people from their country, to work, and they get the money back. They get most of the money back, and we have a debt. So I think it's like I said earlier, until we become self-sufficient and we are able to, we have autonomy and we can finance our own projects, we rely on the Europeans or the Americans, it's always going to be this way.
All right. I will just say one thing here, then we'll move to another session of the argument. You see, it is actually very dangerous for us as a people to survive if we continue to go in this road, no? In that, if you see many African president leaders coming to speak at the United Nations, you see that they really struggle with the language that they are pretending to speak, which is either the British English or the American English. Okay. Why they struggle is natural, because this is not really how they think. Except maybe, of course, you are educated there in American or British, you have spent most of your life there. But if you spend all your life there, how can you become a president of a country people you didn't grow with? That itself doesn't even make sense too. Instead, you should be a president of a country where you have lived your life. You understand the feelings of the people. You should speak the language of the feeling of the people. If you make the French president speak French, the average French person understands it, including the one that didn't go to school. Right. If you bring the German chancellor to speak at the United Nations, the German she is speaking or he is speaking is understood by every German person, including those who did not go to school. But if you bring the Nigerian president to come and speak at the United Nations, apart from the fact that they are strongly, in some cases, the language they are speaking is only for the elites in Nigeria. My
Right.
mother doesn't understand that kind of language. But if you speak the PG English, the Nigerian English, every Nigerian will understand it. That is one. Secondly, if we teach people, if we teach about technology, computer, science, astronomy in British English and we are in Nigeria, we are we are giving disadvantage to the children. Because first of all, that is not how they talk to their mother. That is not how they talk to their friends. That is not how they read the road signs. That is not what they are listening to in most of the cases on the radio and the television. But now they are in school, they need to pretend to speak in a language that is not their own.
Yeah.
That means that is a double challenge. First of all, you need to learn what you are going to learn, but then you're
And
also
learn the
going to learn the
language.
language to learn what you are going to learn.
Yes. That's the
How do we,
problem.
we are basically creating a problem. Whereas if this child, say maybe there is another child now in UK or in US, the only challenge they have is one, learning what you are going to learn.
Yes.
This too
That's
is
a
a
very good
common
point.
sense. Why are we not thinking about it?
Well, let me bring something up before we end this topic. I'll ask you a question now. How would the parents feel if their children were learning in Pidgin English rather than in the Queen's English?
They are going to feel like the queens. Because now, finally, they can interact with the children what they are reading. Tell me about the weather today, for example, and
Yeah.
the European will put it. Tell me about the traffic today. They both can understand each other. But if I speak Queen English, I am going to teach my mother to understand Queen English first. Then I'm
Yeah.
going to teach my mother what I'm learning in school.
That's two times. You double the work.
Yeah. And yet,
Well,
we think it's not a problem.
right. Unfortunately, this Haitian Creole, I would say it wouldn't be the same thing. I actually did a survey where I asked parents whether they would want their children to learn in French in Haitian or Haitian Creole. Many parents were concerned about their children learning only in Haitian Creole. This is why we need to have a lot of in addition to having reforms, to decide to teach them in Haitian Creole, there also needs to be a lot of education of work. We need to work with the society because many parents do not want their children to learn only in Haitian Creole. Do you know why? Can you imagine why?
All right. Well, I can imagine. Maybe it's not 100% correct because I can see Haitians are just like Africa now in everything. The same problem that they are having is what we are having. Now, educational system in Africa, we teach people to memorize things that are not relevant to Africa at all. The reason is that when the colonialists were in Africa, they didn't consider Africa as people or as territory or as economy. They look at it as satellites. In that they only respond to the real economy, which are the economies in Europe. That is how the teaching was also done. In that after you have memorized things like the longest river in US or a lot of gibberish, the only place you can actually make sense of your education is in the West. Because that is the reality you have been taught in school. If this is the message that we have sold to the people, the parent, of course, will be afraid that their children are not learning according to the standard. But I want to point out one thing clear there. Education was supposed to be teaching people what they are going, the knowledge that they are going to apply in their environment.
Right.
If we do that, we see now that we are going to use Pidgin English to teach Nigerian people about the problem of the society. Because after all, that is the language that is spoken in that society.
Right. So to get back to my question, the reason the parents didn't want their children to learn in Haitian Creole is because of the stigma. If you go to a bank and you fill out a form in Creole, they will not accept it from you. If you speak in Creole, people assume that because you speak only Creole, you're not educated. If you don't speak French, you are not educated. So the parents are afraid that their children will have to face the same discrimination that they had to face. And I'll go as far as saying it's not all parents. some parents believe, you know what, it's better that they learn a little something in French, even if they don't speak French perfectly. It's better that they get a little bit of education in French rather than being educated in Haitian Creole. This is how bad it is. And I understand these parents because they have been traumatized. They have been discriminated against because they spoke a language that people look down into. So this is the work that needs to be done. And this is what I am trying to do on my own using the social media and just showing what a beautiful language is and how the Haitian Creole language can use in any topic. You can use Haitian Creole in science. You can use, authentic Haitian Creole in any way, because we need to educate the public about the Haitian Creole. And a lot of people are not really exposed to a more advanced Haitian Creole. They speak Haitian Creole at home, and then when they go to in a professional setting, they speak French, so they don't see Creole. They do not see how Creole can be used in any setting. And me, since I work, I translate so many materials and I've used science and history and politics. I've done so much work in the language. And yes, it's a very complex language like any other language. But until we show that to the public, they think that it's a language that you speak in the streets. So this is the work that we need to do. I'm trying to make Haitian Creole accessible to everyone, so they can see not only is it a beautiful language, it's a very beautiful language, it's a poetic language, it has so much imagery, but it's also a language that can be used in the sciences. So before we start this, introducing the language in education, the parents need to understand that the children will learn better and they will have a better future. And once they master these subjects in Haitian Creole, then they could learn French, they could learn Spanish. I think it's great to speak many languages, but you need to have understanding in your mother tongue. That's when you'll be able to understand all topics. And it will also be easier for you to learn other languages once you master your own language.
This is a common sense.
Right.
That is, if people are using a common sense. Because now, you send a child to go to school and learn. Now, the child went to school and learned. And now, because of the reality that this child has learned, the child needs to translate to you before you can understand.
Right.
I don't understand. Whereas in the United States, in Italy, in France, or in Germany, you don't need the bridge of translation is not there at all. You just tell your parent what you have learned.
Right.
I think people should be thinking about that. But of course, this is also strategic, no? I understand it.
It's strategic, it's intelligent, and we have been doing it all wrong. But we need to, like what I will say, but people are used to a system where they believe French means intelligent. We even have a proverb that says, parler français pas vle dire l'esprit pour ça. And it means just because you speak French doesn't mean you're smart. But that's because people believe that if you are able to speak French, that means you went to school. That means your economic status is better. So then they attach that to being educated. So we need to teach people that it's not true. Of course, I'm not going to belittle people who speak French, but just because you don't speak French doesn't mean that you are not intelligent. We need to teach these people. It's kind of like socializing them, to teach them that it's okay if your child speaks only Creole, because that parent who doesn't want her child to learn in Haitian Creole, it's because she wants what's best for her kid. She thinks that's what's best for her kid. She thinks that's her only hope to getting a job. And she's not thinking about how important it is to be in an environment where you are learning. And even another thing that we need to talk about is using our ancestral traditions in education to teach the children about nature, to teach them about, being in harmony with nature and all of that. So these are the things that we need to do, but the whole system needs to have a reform. And I believe that the current Minister of Education is working to on that, and they're educating people. So we have a long way to go, but they are making efforts. And I believe that if it wasn't because of Haiti's socio-political problem, the climate is very tense at the moment, and that affects everything. If the government is unstable, everything else will fall apart. We basically have our government has collapsed. So nothing is going to work in a country where we don't even have a president. We don't know where we are going. So that also hurts every aspect of
All
life
right.
in Haiti.
All right, my dear sister Julien, the instability, the turbulence is part of the plan. The Nigeria that I'm talking to you about is still in the same situation. Okay, we don't have war in Nigeria, but the country is in chaos.
Yeah.
Now, let's look at that for a moment. African people really are not stupid, just like in Haiti too. But we are in a system that is so complex, and we are offered the difference between me slapping you or me giving you a blow. You are going to feel the pain anyway. The question is, choose which one do you want to take. The people are being exploited at every angle, and we try to look for a way to justify it. We are just in a machine that is continuously grinding us, grinding us, grinding us. Now, let's look at poverty, for example. Poverty is an economic tool, actually, that is used against the people so that the people are never able to go beyond that, beyond the set limit that is given to them. Terms like technology, terms like science, astronomy, things like the real essence of what advances society will not be important for you to discuss if you don't have food on your table.
Of course.
Because
Yeah.
that is the only thing that you care about, because you need to live.
Yeah, when you are hungry, you can't think about anything else. When you are always in a state of urgency, you can't plan for the future. And Haiti has always been in a state of emergency, and it's the same for African countries. We've always been in a state of emergency, so we can't really plan ahead.
So I just wanted that one to be very clear, that for the fact that Nigeria is going to burst, it's not a magic. It has been planned to be like that. We're always on the keg of gunpowder. It's going to explode. It's a system. It is set up like that. Because if it is not like that, then somebody is going to sit down and think, but why is it like this? Why is it not like that? But if there is this loop of crisis, you cannot think. How can you think? I interviewed the former ambassador of Nigeria to Italy one time, and he did say something very important. That for a people to reflect, they need to sit down.
Yeah.
But what we have in many parts of Africa and also the African diaspora is that we have countries that are continuously in a loop of a crisis I just finished, the next one is coming on the way. Nobody knows what is going to happen. We don't know. It's about to explode. If it's about to explode, how can you sit and think?
What you've just explained is Haiti's situation. I actually stopped watching the news, to protect my mental health, because we just go from one crisis to another crisis to another crisis to another crisis. It's like, and you know how there's this strategy of manipulation where information chases information, chases information, chases information. And when you are observing what is happening in Haiti, you can see that this is something that is well planned. Everything that is happening, and you just have no control over it. And you so I just ignore, I just don't watch the news, and I just try to focus on the things that I have control over. But the situation in Haiti is very complex, because you want to say we want to take charge of our destiny, but there are powers that just will not take that from you. They'll do whatever it takes to get rid of you if you try to take charge of the country's destiny. So what do you do in a situation like that? When you want the country to start on the road to development, but there are powers that don't want Haiti to be developed. It's kind of like doctors. If people are not sick, then we won't need doctors. So they're also going to create disease and do all of these things so that they can stay relevant. So I think that's the problem with Haiti. Haiti is there's a former president who once said, Haiti is too rich to be poor. We have so many resources. Haiti is rich, and we have our culture, our people. We have so much to offer for the country to have been developed already, but we're still there. If it's not a disaster, it's a political, it's just everything is going wrong for the country. So I just feel like this is something that is well planned. And it's going to take a while before we get out of where we are, because we have our own people who are accomplice and to this. That's the sad part. The people who are supposed to be protecting us, they are the ones involved in all this madness in Haiti. So it's if you look at a country like Cuba, what's happening in Haiti would not have happened in Cuba, because they have leaders that care about the country, that care about the people. So, but the situation in Haiti is very, very hard to watch.
We hope that it change. But if something must be taken away from the conversation today, it must be understood that it is not by accident. Most of the things that are happening actually are planned and were orchestrated. So if we are in difficulty, it is part of our education. Our education is set up to put us in difficulty, to educate you away from who you are, educate you into a confusion, then sort out yourself in the confusion.
Yeah, so you don't know who you are. I mean, because there's a and I learned this. There was a video on YouTube. There was a young man talking about, we have these short stories that we learn and as children, are fables. And it's a story about these two guys where one of them is always tricking the other one. He's always trying to outsmart the other one. They're called Buki and Malice. And it's an integral part of Haitian culture, where the one who's always outsmarting the other one, tricking the other one, or stealing from him is considered the smart one. And the one who likes to share, who would have been considered as the good one, is the dumb one. We even he's a Buki. That means that person is dumb. So there was a conversation about how we are being taught to be corrupted and tricky, and to manipulate our own, even when we are at like a very small age, at early childhood, because these stories, they shape how you see the world and how you see yourself and how you see other people. So this is why we are being taught in school. And that's why I decided to write my book with all of these new fables, where we teach them, more stories on how to live in harmony with each other, live in harmony with your brothers and sisters, live in harmony with nature, because these stories are teaching us to not be, our best selves. So you're right. The education system is just, I think it really ruins these young people, because they grow up with these mindsets of lack and a poverty mindset. So this is one thing we didn't talk about: religion. That's another hindrance for people's development, because they don't teach you to just be independent, to work. It's okay to be poor, we're going to heaven. So all of these things are keeping us down where we are. And that's, I think, one way to at least start, if it's not going to be in my generation, to start educating people about their power, about their strength. We are born with all of this great power within us, but then as we, education just weakens us. So I call it, people say it's miseducation. So this is what we need to work on. And this is the only thing I can do during my time here is to work on, educating people to love themselves, to appreciate what they have, our language and our culture. We have such a beautiful language, a beautiful culture. We are very powerful people. We're Africans. So this is all I can do, for now, because things are very complex in Haiti. So I decided that I wasn't going to focus in politics. I wasn't going to focus in the madness. I would just focus on what I can do and use my skills to help educate these small children so we could create, different citizens that will, think about the country instead of, thinking about themselves.
Thank you for that. That is a good project because education really is everything when it is done correctly, and it's
Right.
everything that will go wrong when it is done wrongly. In Africa today, it is done wrongly. I know I'm generalizing, but it is done
Right.
wrongly.
For
When
the
you
most part.
educate, for the most part, it is done wrongly, and the consequence is that we are going to suffer this because nothing goes for nothing. We are going to suffer the consequence of what we are doing. I'm saying this also because I am continuously talking with people from different ethnic backgrounds, not just one. In Nigeria, for example, I've interviewed several people from inside their culture, the Igbo, the Yorubas, even my culture, which is Esan. We are a small, a minute people in Nigeria in the sense that we are not big. We are not the big player. The population of the whole of Esan is about 1.5 million people. So, uh, of all of them, all these different people that I'm talking to, one thing is common with all, that our value are declining. People are losing respect for their value system. And
Yeah.
this was brought about by this educational system. In that when you educate the people to hate your language, I
Yeah.
remember in my school days, I was literally flogged for speaking my language, which is Esan.
Yeah, they do that in Haiti. They
Then,
don't do that anymore. They used to do that.
I'm sure they still do it in Nigeria today. If you are a Nigerian person, you are listening to me, tell me if you have any experience like that. Have you been flogged for speaking your language? Do you think it's still happening today? Because you might think that it doesn't make any sense, but it makes a lot of sense. Because when you punish somebody for doing something, you are instilling a mark in that individual's consciousness.
Right.
That next time you are doing that same thing, remember this. In fact, in my place, they say that you punish a child for wrongdoing, not for the wrongdoing in particular, but so that it doesn't repeat it next time.
Right.
So if you punish a child for speaking his or her language, you are actually instilling negativity about that language in this child. So if people are growing up not loving their language, it's not natural. It's because it's part of the programming in the school.
Yeah, and your language is a part of who you are. Your language
Absolutely.
it's like teaching yourself hate. Um, well, I would have to say, thankfully, a lot of people over the years, a lot of what I call Creolists have worked hard for Haitian Creole to get the respect it deserves. We have a long way to go. There's still the social stigma, but we have some pioneers who have worked hard. And Haitian Creole is the only Creole language that has its own writing system. We have our own alphabet, and it is recognized by the Haitian Constitution. The Haitian Constitution says there is only one language that unites all Haitians, and that is Haitian Creole. So they do have the willingness for us to start appreciating our language. And we even have Creole Month. The month of October is Creole Month, where we celebrate the Haitian Creole language. And so we are, compared to other Creole languages, we are way ahead of other Creole languages, and as you said, and perhaps even languages in Africa. So I have hope that Haitian Creole will continue to grow and evolve and get its place in society and the world. Haitian Creole is one of the top 10 languages spoken in the United States. If you look at the Census Bureau, Haitian Creole is we are over French. We are one of the top 10 languages. And when I get request, it's Haitian Creole is also always in those lists of top 10 languages. So we do respect the language, and we do understand that it's the only language that Haitians really speak. And businesses and employees, employers, they know that for them to really get their message across to Haitian people, they have to use Haitian Creole. Whereas before it used to be French, or they used to call it French Creole, and now it has its own name. So I would say, I'm very proud of the work that the people before me have done for Haitian Creole to get where it is. But then because of all the other social issues that we're dealing with, so we still have some work to be done.
All right. So, in terms of work, in terms of projects, can you explain to us what exactly you are doing in Haiti? Help us understand that.
Oh, I'm doing a lot of things in Haiti. Haiti is my heart. I am working on, well, I have a team of translators working in Haiti, and we train them. I'm working on a dictionary project. It's a Haitian Creole dictionary project with a group of students who studied linguistics and translations. That project will be coming out this year. I am working on with a non-for-profit organization. Well, that's a whole different topic, but I'll tell you a little bit about it. We are building roads. We are working in education. We're working in agriculture. We're doing a lot it's like a mountain in the mountains. It's an area called Carrefour, where people didn't have access to roads or anything. And we've been working with them for the past few years just to alleviate their situation, because there's a lot of difficulty in that region. And finally, I just published my first Haitian Creole book called Nan Jardin Harmonie. It's called In the Garden of Harmony. It's a children's book, a collection of fables, like really popular fables, that I've adapted into Haitian Creole. I did that book for the kids in that region where we help, because I wanted them to have books in their language, so they could learn the morals about, the stories. We have stories about, do not lie, share with your brethren, and just, protect the environment. Just even if a tree doesn't have fruits, it has its place in the ecosystem. It gives you oxygen. So it was just a way to start, working on their minds, trying to help them, to reverse all the negativity that they are hearing. So this is my special project this year. It's called Nan Jardin Harmonie. And if anyone, even if you don't speak Creole, if you speak Creole and would like to get the book, you'll find it on Amazon. And every time I sell one book, I donate one book to the kids at the schools. We work with 33 schools. So even if you don't speak Creole, you can buy one book and the kids will get two books. And I'm also on social media, on Instagram, Facebook, where every day we have the word of the day so that you can learn a new word in Creole. We have just everything you want to learn about Haiti and Creole. So we teach them in Creole, so that just a way to give the world access to the Haitian Creole language, which is a beautiful language that everyone should learn. And especially if you're African, I think you would be interested in learning Haitian Creole, because you'll see the similarities with other African languages, especially in West Africa.
Thank you so much for that. Now, let's talk a bit about the monetization of this language, because everything can actually become money. And for the
Yes.
people in our community, we care for the fact that the people must find a way to make money with anything at all they know, including their local languages.
Yes.
So, what is your suggestion? What do you want to say to somebody in Haiti on how to make money with the Haiti Creole, with the Haitian Creole?
Well, with the internet, there are so many ways to make money, and there are websites. Well, I mean, you can personally contact me if you are interested in, working as a translator. There are so many websites like ProZ, Translators Cafe. on the internet where you can just register for free. You put your resume, and then you can also look at the list of translation agencies. There are hundreds of translation agencies. You can contact them, because what I did when I first started was I was I didn't have a job. I was in school. So what I did was, for months, contacted hundreds of agencies. Most of the time they have forms on their websites where you can apply, and then they'll contact you when they need you. And you can create your own things. Like, you can create, a lot of people want to learn Haitian Creole. If you are creative, you can create creative videos to teach Creole on YouTube. You can create your own classes. You could be a teacher. People are always asking me if I want to teach them Creole, but I don't have the time because I'm running my business. So that's another opportunity. Haitian Creole is highly regarded, especially in the United States. So there are many opportunities. Of course, if you want to offer your services, you have to be a professional. You have to understand, have a good grasp of both Haitian Creole and English. You have to be a good writer, because translating is not just taking one word and placing the equivalent in another language. You also have to write something that the people enjoy reading, that is clear and concise. So, and even if you want to do that, there's training. You could learn online, you could take translation courses. So there is a lot of opportunities for people who are interested in Haitian Creole, because there is a lot of demand in Haitian Creole translation. Like I said, I went from 2014, it was just the two of us, and now there are over 20 translators, and we are always working. We are always busy.
How can people connect with you? Those who want to work with you, I want you to spend some few seconds advertising yourself. Go ahead and do that.
Career Solutions is exactly what it says. We provide solutions for clients who want to communicate with the Haitian population, whether you are, a hospital administrator, or working in the hotel, human resources, or your business and you want to enter the Haitian market, or you want to advertise to Haitians in Miami, Boston, New York. We are the reference. We specialize in Haitian Creole translation and adaptation. So you wouldn't just be getting a translation like you get the English word placed into the Haitian Creole. We really use a language that the people will understand. All of us, we are plain language advocates. So that means we use a language that is clear and concise. So your message will get delivered. And we are constantly improving. Like, we offer training to our translators, and we have a team of over 20 translators. So we are really, if you are looking for translation services, we could be considered as your in-house translators, because we are always available. And our translators, they are passionate about the language. They've studied translation and linguistics. So I have to say that we are the best when it comes to Haitian Creole translation services.
What do you think should be done to save the Haitian language? I mean, what are the strategy? What can be done to accomplish this?
As long as Haitians exist, Haitian Creole will continue to flourish, because we speak the language. It's a natural language. It's a way for us to communicate with each other. So we will continue to speak Haitian Creole. One way to continue, for the language to continue to evolve, is what I'm doing right now, to digitalize the language, to have it on social media. We're working on the dictionary. We're working on, having voice, just using technology to digitalize the language, and educating people about the language, teaching people that it's not, yes, it is a way for us to communicate, but it's also a beautiful language like any other language. That's one thing that we really need to work on, and to make the language accessible to more people. More people, people need to read more in Haitian Creole. That's one thing that, for it to go to the next level, more people need to read and write, not just speak it, but read and write in Haitian Creole. And that work is being done already, but we need more people. And of course, if you're going to invest your time and your money in publishing a book, we need people to support this project. So we need more people to buy Haitian Creole books, read, so that more people can produce in Haitian Creole. People are complaining we don't have enough content in Haitian Creole, but you need to buy it so more people can produce it.
That's lovely. Is there any other thing you would like to say to conclude the conversation that we have had today?
I had a great conversation, and it's really a privilege to be in the show, like I told you earlier. And thank you for the work that you're doing to connect Africans and people in the African diaspora. And I really, really look forward to visiting Nigeria one day.
That would be lovely. We are waiting for you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, sister. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Have a great day.
If you enjoyed this podcast, make sure you subscribe so you never miss any of our future episodes. Rate and review Obehi Podcast and share with your friends who might need it. I remain Obehi Ewafo. Thank you so much for listening, and talk to you in the next episode.